I would like to introduce our first speaker, Paul Evans from Southwest Research Institute, representing the ROS-Industrial American here today, giving us some insights what's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. It's been a pleasure getting to know a lot of y'all over the last couple of days, and very impressed with what's happening on the European front. Y'all are setting the bar really high, and that's good. We like that, and so I appreciate being here today, being a part of what y'all are doing. And what I'm going to do today is just cover some of the highlights of what's going on in the Americas for the Consortium for ROS-Industrial. It's organized in a sequence of some of the things that we're doing relative to voice of our members. We'll highlight some of the projects and activities. So hopefully you get a little bit of a sampling of a broad set of things that are going on. So it's not going to focus on any one thing. So we're going to hop around a little bit, so to speak. All right. Let's see here. So first, just I didn't realize that video had music, but if y'all don't mind, crank it, if you can turn that down. Or maybe it's not something you can control. All right, perfect. So we'll just step through just a few highlights of some of the things that we're working on. Training, like here, is also a focus for us. We're typically events that are sold out. So we could deliver more. I think it's something we have to look at carefully and figure out how do we increase our bandwidth. We have a lot of interest from not only from industry but from universities as well. So collectively, with Europe and the U.S., sharing best practices and content and things, I think we can go further faster. We did transition our ROS-Industrial Consortium leadership. So many of y'all maybe have met a couple of our former leaders, Paul Voss and Sean Edwards. They're working on a startup company that heavily leverages ROS capabilities, and so we're excited to see where that goes, and will be an example of something that we can point to in the future. In the meantime, our new consortium leader in the Americas is a person who came to us from Caterpillar, who was in their R&D group for advanced manufacturing. He was using a heavy user of ROS in their labs, and so he's hit the ground running, so to speak, and really been a champion for what we're trying to do relative to ROS-Industrial and also the coordination with Europe and with Asia Pacific. Supporting Matt is also another gentleman named Levi Armstrong. He comes to us formerly from Bell Helicopter, and he is supporting Matt heavily on a technical role. So Matt more on leadership and business. They regret they couldn't be here today, but I expect that you'll see them again in the future. One of the things that we'll talk about here in a few minutes too is we accomplished what we call Milestone Robotic Blending Milestone 4 with a real tangible demonstration at an integrator facility. We're looking forward to rolling that out further. We've been working on a bridge between MT Connect, which is a kind of a machine tool standard on communications and cloud connectivity, and ROS-Industrial. We've focused on listening to the voice of our members and what are their priorities, what are their interests, and how do we start to solve those problems or those challenges. Some of that is through new strategic launches of projects and capabilities. And then we'll touch base on the Decoded episode that just came out. So first of all, voice of member. One of the things that our consortium leader did when he came to us from his position at Caterpillar is that he started looking at what is it that the members are seeing as value out of ROS and ROS-Industrial. And then what do we do as a consortium to offer some of the benefits back to, in a stronger way, to those organizations and individuals that are participating. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the items that we're focused on, not all encompassing, but some of y'all may be aware that in the Americas we've launched recently what's called the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Institute. So it's called ARM-I, and that institute is part of this network of institutes for manufacturing innovation. One of the things that we're working on is how do we coordinate and complement this new institute And one of the things that we're working on with them is how that ROS Industrial can be a central theme or maybe a repository for a lot of the good work that will come out of that institute. We've heard from the customer that they're interested in access and alignment with universities, students that are coming out of universities. They need more skills in this ROS Industrial and ROS area. So we're working on coordination with universities on how do we build that talent pipeline. Also, the other thing too is it's well recognized, and we've seen this too in some of the slides that over the last couple of days, is inspiring and bringing the integrator community into the room and in a bigger way. Clearly there's some integrators that are here tracking with the initiative, but what do we do to further inspire and enable integrators to be part of the ROS Industrial Initiative? So that's also one of the things we're working on. One of the other categories that came out of some of this discussion with the voice of the member was this idea of rapidly moving from just a proof of concept to something that you can put on the production floor. We want to create more examples of that, so one of the things that we want to work on is having a better way to showcase some of these use cases, samples, pilots. In many cases, we find that some of them are hidden behind the factory walls, behind proprietary, part of proprietary capabilities. We want to work with our members to try to figure out ways that we can better showcase or highlight some of the things that are going on the factory floor, and how to improve the rapid deployment of capabilities. I won't touch on network reliability and security. It's just something we hear about from our members. We know there's a lot of work going on to handle or address that, and that will kind of be an ongoing central theme I think we'll continue to hear. Flexibility and agility is the other thing that we get asked about is in this world of how do I reconfigure my factory floor quickly, how do I repurpose a robot, how do I leverage legacy equipment that I already have as part of my portfolio of equipment and capabilities. That's another thing there's a request from a member to figure out how do we better leverage legacy hardware and quick deployment. All right, so one of the things that we've worked on to help address some of this is starting to look at, are there standards that we can start linking to and have a tighter coupling between ROS Industrial. So MT Connect is initially as machine tool was what it was, machine tool connectivity for your machine tools. It's been expanded as far as that working group to be something more about factory connectivity, not just machine tool connectivity. So one of the initiatives we've been working on through the National Institute of Standards and Technologies is building a generic bridge that links up to MT Connect that starts to offer a broader connectivity between the automation equipment and other things like machine tools, coordinate measuring machines. So we start building out this capability of many-to-many connections on the factory floor between lots of different pieces of equipment. There is an MT Connect repository on GitHub, and you can go there and see a little bit more about what's going on. And then on the blog, the ROS Industrial blog, you can read multiple blog posts about the progress on this initiative if it's something that's of interest. Also looking at strategic initiatives, there has been an interest from the Americas, and I don't know if about the request so much from the Europe or Asia Pacific, but to start to understand better who's doing what, right? And so one of the things that we've started to put together is this notional, I'd call it an organizational chart, but that might be too strong of a term, but this idea of identifying who does what within the ROS Industrial Consortium on the leadership, not only on fostering the consortium itself and supporting the members, but also on different capabilities, different technologies, different core competencies within the software development framework. So I realize that's like super small. These slides will be available later so you can look at it with a sharper eye. So that's what this represents up here on the top right corner. The other thing too is that we're looking for others to add to that list, right? So coordinating with Mirko or with Matt Robinson are good ways to start looking at, hey, how do I add myself to that list? Because I'm shepherding a core part of the capability within the ROS Industrial Framework. I want to be responsible. And so we're looking for that kind of initiative, that kind of volunteer. The other thing, too, is that we're looking at highlighting in a special way those drivers, those original equipment capabilities that are tighter coupled to ROS Industrial and to ROS. So basically recognizing that there's something that's maybe supported by an original equipment manufacturer versus something that maybe somebody put up on the web and maybe is not very mature. So we're looking to highlight those ones that have more maturity in a special way. And then also we recognize that it's time to start moving towards a ROS-2 training module in the Americas, and certainly we're looking forward to leveraging what's occurring in the other parts of the global community relative to ROS-2 training as we begin to prepare our journey on that as well. The last thing that I'll mention on the strategic initiatives is there's been this request from industry that, yeah, the roadmap's great. So have anybody seen the roadmap for ROS Industrial? It's on the website, and also it's been in a brochure, a few people. Okay. I think it's great. It's got a lot of kind of capabilities and it's really well laid out. But the challenge that industry has had is that, okay, well, really we want to try to solve some problems. And so if I want to solve a problem, I want to go grab different parts of this roadmap and put them in a shopping cart, so to speak, and be able to use those. So as we think about the timeline and the priorities for the different elements on the roadmap, it'd be good to also think about the problems that industry is trying to solve relative to those elements of the roadmap and their priorities on those problems. So it's a different way to look at the roadmap. We're starting to craft or cast that viewpoint over the course of this next year. So look forward to seeing more about that. Community engagement also remains a priority for the Americas. There's the items as far as the events. There's too numerous to mention. I'm just going to highlight a few that are of interest. One is that we had a number of requests from startup community asking to create a special category for them within the consortium. So within our agreement, we did add that as an opportunity for startups to be better recognized and also have a better opportunity to come in and engage with the consortium. We've also been fostering what I would call meetups. And that's just basically helping organizations or individuals understand how to bring together a community of interested, like-minded roboticists in their area to try to create some synergy within a certain geographical region. We're also doing that in San Antonio as well in collaboration with the Plus One Robotics staff, which is Sean Edwards, helping us with that too in the San Antonio region. World Move It Day was one of our highlights too over the course of this last year. We loved participating in that, seeing a lot of the great progress, and we were inspired by that, and we launched the World ROS-I Day, and I think over the course of about 22 hours, we solved about 31 different specific issues that were recognized. So we call that a success. We're on deck for keeping that alive and doing that again and again, and so look forward to the announcements on that in 2019. And also recognition, we want to highlight special contributors. So there's opportunities, particularly through blog posts. We'd like to keep the blog posts active. And so as you have things that you think the community needs to be aware of, certainly reach out to the ROS Industrial leadership team, and we're anxious to continue to add highlights from contributors, from organizations on the good things that's going on with the ROS Industrial initiative. This next slide is something that we've had a request from not only from industry but also from the original equipment manufacturers themselves, both, where we highlight some of the contributions that are coming out of some companies that provide their own drivers, if you will, and support those and maintain them. And we want to continue to build that out. And so one of the things that we need from the community, from you all, is to be able to share that with your preferred robot provider or your preferred sensor provider and make that request to them that they support support their own driver, that they build their own driver, their own connectivity to ROS and ROS-Industrial. So that's another thing that we're working on this year, is kind of coordinate that in a better way to try to put emphasis on that to the original equipment manufacturers. So this last year in March we had our annual meeting, maybe similar to what you see here. We had a great group of the community in the Americas come together, solving problems, talking about initiatives, really coming together in a networking way too, that at the end of the event it's inspiring, similar to what we find here. Much of what we had was voice of industry examples. So how is industry using ROS-Industrial in real ways? Some highlights from that is Boeing talked about how they're using ROS-Industrial within their organization, where it works, how it solved problems. I'll show an example from a couple others. It was a really inspiring message to hear about some of the initiatives that maybe aren't as publicly highlighted, but within the consortium and within the ROS-Industrial community meetings, we're starting to hear more and find out more, and that's good. So these are just some pictures from the events. We had 9 different demonstrations and had about 20 speakers over the course of that event. So one of the examples that I'll highlight here came from Bastion Solutions, where they talked about how they were able to go from some concepts, some ideas, to something that they put into an expo and then also onto a factory floor much more rapidly than what they could do if they had just homegrown everything from scratch. Right? And so you see on the screen some of the specific things that they used out of the ROS community that enabled their work. And some of the other things that they were able to take advantage of as part of being part of the community was getting their staff trained up on what is ROS and how does it work, and how do I get my team all working together collaboratively. Through the training activities that they participated in, they were able to do that. They also appreciated the modularity with a lot of the different systems and components and hardware that they were using, and then obviously the accelerated timeline to get something functional. So here's the example of what they put together, which is a mobile manipulation capability. And this was an expo demonstration that they put together. So this is an example of where you do a picking operation. You prepare it into the bed of the system, and then it also has a conveyor on it so that it can be moved off, kind of in a warehousing operation, right? So some other things that we highlighted, part of a request for the industry is tell us more about tools and capabilities and things that we can use that maybe we don't know about, or maybe we could get some more information on. So we had a series of presentations on some of these things. I'm not going to go into all of them here. I just list a few of them as examples. There's more information available on each of these on the ROS-Industrial website under the blog posts, and also in the repository. So if any of these strike your interest, I know there's a growing community of users of the Qt Creator. I know there's been interest too in the intelligent part reconstruction, like how do we basically build out a higher quality 3D map of shiny parts or things that are generally hard to process in 3D. So lots of good stuff. Continue to visit the ROS-Industrial blog site for staying up with the latest in what's emerging on capabilities and tools. One of the other things we highlighted too in the annual meeting was the blending results. And we were excited to know and see that the industry is wanting to move forward on a Milestone 5. So we've completed Milestone 4, which was demonstration of the blending capability at scale on real parts that came from manufacturers. So what was this blending capability? Well, it's essentially taking a part, putting it in front of the robot, have the robot sense or automatically scan the part. The operator then identifies the surfaces from that scan that are eligible for blending or grinding or polishing. All right? And once those surfaces are selected by the operator, then the paths are automatically generated. Then the robot goes and does its work, right, using those paths. There is a simulation component to that, so the operator can validate that the paths are appropriate. if they wish. And then we also have this quality assurance inspection piece that goes with this hand in hand. So part of Milestone 5 would be to further build out the integration with the quality assurance component. And then also there is some interest in having some of the elements of this have with cloud connectivity. So we can certainly share more about Milestone 5 if there's anybody that's interested. Maybe speak to me after the meeting and we can see if you want to track with that on a focused technical project. I have a few more slides on this one. This is something Mirko asked me to see if I could elaborate a little bit more on. But this was also presented at the annual meeting by the Air Force Research Laboratory. So Air Force Research Laboratory has a manufacturing technology program. And part of that program is to create and generate capabilities that are not useful just for Air Force, but also broadly general and capabilities that can be used across the aerospace industry. And this is an initiative that they launched with Southwest Research Institute and Boeing and the National Center for Defense Manufacturing and Machining collaborating together. And it's less about the robot and more about the software. So what we're working on is taking some of the capabilities that we've developed in this scan and plan domain, and then we're looking at, let's create scan and plan for X, where X could be any of these things that you see on the right-hand side, whether it's painting or sanding or non-destructive inspection, blending, but where you have essentially an underlying framework where we bolt on process capabilities. All right? So that's been the focus of the initiative. As part of the initiative, we also got to build a really big, cool robot, and so that was exciting as well. And ROS is at the core. ROS-Industrial is at the core of this program as the underpinnings for how we're accomplishing this work. So the first focus for us has been sanding operations as a demonstration capability, the first process, if you will, that we're bolting into the framework. Right? And then the repository is available to the ROS-Industrial Consortium members at this time. So here's some pictures of the system as we put it together and we were testing things in our facility. We were using mock-ups, if you will, of panels that represented similar shapes and heights of what we would find on an aircraft. And then we had a part of a fuselage where we started working on that to try to demonstrate initially proof of concept capability before we would go to something more full scale. So the platform we used is off-the-shelf components essentially that are integrated together. And again, it's more about the software framework approach. So how did this work? So what we have is a system where an operator positions it up into an area close to an aircraft. And then once it's close to, then we have this ongoing active wide area scanning capability that's on the platform. So we're building a 3D map of the environment that the mobile platform is working within. And then the operator can then choose or select what region of the aircraft that they want to actually, if you will, sand in this case, right? That's the first process is sanding. But it could be other processes, whatever they might be. So the operator selects a region. Within that region, then the paths are generated so that we can go do a fine or a detailed scan. And so that's what the robot would do next, is go do a detailed scan of that area. And then once the detailed scan is done, then the process ensues. And then the process in this case was provided by Boeing on the sanding part, and it's a closed-loop process by which it's also monitored over the course of time. Our contribution at Southwest Research and the ROS-Industrial team has been more around the 3D data processing, the path planning, the underpinning, the framework that we're working with. And then the last part of that step is actually to do a scuff sand. So we demonstrated this on an actual aircraft. I'm going to show a video, but we're just going to stop streaming just for a couple of minutes, or actually for a few seconds while we play that out. So this is on an actual aircraft, and this is after the scan where the robot is going through this process of automatically scuff sanding the aircraft. I just have a brief few segments of this video to share, but wanted to show you that we've moved to the point where we're working on an actual aircraft with the ROS-Industrial Scan and Plan for X framework. So we thought that was really cool, a lot of excitement around that. and interest from aerospace industry in general on seeing that progress. I also wanted to highlight something else that occurred that I think I'm going to transition a little bit, and I'm going to start talking about this global collaboration that we start seeing occur as a result of this community that we're all involved with. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a new what's called Decoded episode that Microsoft put together, but there's a collaboration that we supported on the ROS-Industrial program with Microsoft and BMW this last year, where the BMW started looking at how to do mini mobile robot coordination for assembly and logistics. All right, and so in this case, the ROS-Industrial Americas was able to support evaluating different simulation environments and engines, and then the ROS-Industrial Consortium in Europe was able to provide additional capabilities and support for navigation and tech support over here. So great collaboration. The video is put together nicely and showcases ROS-Industrial as something that's useful for industry. So I encourage you to go check that out. It's on the ROS-Industrial blog site, but you can also Google for it. I wanted to highlight also the upcoming ROS-Industrial Consortium event in Chicago in the spring. So if you get a chance and you're able to attend Automate, it's April 8 to 11 in Chicago, and then we're going to hold the annual meeting for the consortium on April 12, the Friday after Automate. And so maybe we'll see some of you there. I know that in the past, some of the European consortium members have traveled to the U.S. for Automate and have stayed on, so you might tuck that in the back of your mind and think about that for next year. My last slide. So we advanced ROS-Industrial together. One of the things that has been inspiring for the team that I work with is this ability to, I guess you could say, tear down geographic barriers, and we're all working on a common, coordinated effort supporting this ROS-Industrial initiative. And it truly is something that if we were just doing this in pockets by ourselves, things would not be progressing the way they are, as rapidly as they are. Where in Europe you have Rosen, for example. Lots of great capabilities, lots of good focus on quality coming out of there. In the U.S. or North Americas, we have more of this focus on, it seems like applications is more of the priority. Asia Pacific has great demonstration capability to leverage some of the capabilities that are coming out of the consortium. So collectively, we all complement one another, and our goal in the Americas is to continue a tight coupling with the ROS-Industrial global community and partner with Fraunhofer Institute. And we appreciate everything that you as the community does to build this program, and we look forward to continuing to be a part of it. And thank you for all you do. So I don't know if we have time for questions and answers after the static incident earlier. But.
So actually, we have time for maybe one question. So who wants?
So make it really good, right?
No one? Well, then I would say
again.
Okay. And in the interest of time, we move directly to the next speaker.